let me give you a thought on that. I see your point with Charles Sims, and I'll raise you another. Jameis Winston throughout 3 games has been kept in check down.
Yes.
Week 1, he was underneath to Doug Martin and Charles Sims all day against Atlanta.
Exactly.
He checked down all day. They gave him that, and he took it. You can't criticize it. That's what's there. Take it. It's worth 8, 9, 12 yards every time you turn around. And running backs in PPR leagues, running backs aren't often put in the position to make difficult catches.
No.
They have 9 targets. Usually 7 of them are dump-offs.
Yeah, so every catch is a half point, and you know he's going to get them. And his value, he's $6,500. So, I mean, when you're looking at building a team, you can now put him in and then afford a Cam or a Drew Brees, the no-brainers for the week, like I like to call them, that your most sure things, but when they're over $8,000, it's going to be tough to assemble a team. So
that is a lot. I love the Charles Sims analysis, though.
So
I like that.
Yeah, you go with the Charles Sims. If he gets you 20 points, you're golden. And now you've got Cam Newton as your quarterback instead of someone, $1,500 cheaper that is going to give you that less production.
I like it. I like it quite a bit. So, second running back.
I'm riding the Melvin Gordon train again.
Are you? God,
I hate to do it. He's going up against New Orleans at home.
I know.
Danny Woodhead has him. That elevated him right off the bat. So, if nothing else, it doesn't matter what defense he's playing at home or away. Doesn't matter. He's now got that much more production coming his way. He's obviously blossoming this year compared to last year.
Yeah.
So I feel comfortable making that choice.
He crushed me last week.
Yeah, he's going against the worst rushing defense.
Yeah.
So I have to think that, sometimes you just have to say, well, and again, this goes back to, will it happen like it should? You have to say, it's a no-brainer. I like what this looks like for him this week. And regardless of whether or not it gets in a shootout, the way that San Diego's offense runs it relies on production from the running back.
It does. It sets up the pass, and I think Rivers is dealing with a lack of rapport with some of his receivers, so he does need everything underneath. Melvin Gordon's pass catching game needs to improve, but I think at $7,600, you got a nice pick there, especially coupled with a Charles Sims. And if you think for 1 second that I'm not plugging this lineup in as we go, you're crazy.
Yeah, well, that's fine. That's fine. You know what? You and I will be up there.
I like it.
New Orleans has given up 5 yards of carries. They're second in touchdowns allowed at 6. It just screams Melvin Gordon.
It does.
And
it really does.
Again,
you like the home side of it. If you watch the Monday night game, New Orleans on the ground was absolutely throttled. It was roughshod. Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman just went nuts. And by the way, in one league I was down by like 20 points with Tevin Coleman left.
Nice. And you didn't think at all you thought you might be lucky for half that.
I was hoping to at least have a respectable beating and walk out of there with 12 additional points. And as he scored his 3rd touchdown, I just started laughing.
Yeah, exactly.
Every now and again, sometimes you eat the bear and sometimes the bear eats you, and it's just nice to be on the right side of that every now and again. So right now, as far as we're plugging in our FanDuel lineup, you love Melvin Gordon at $7,600. You talked me into seeing the light on Charles Sims, even against that Bronco defense. I think that might be a great play because a lot of people are not going to jump on the Charles Sims train because they see Denver on the other side.
Yeah, when you hear the Denver defense, you get afraid because you're like, ooh, the Denver defense. They're giving up 4.7 yards a carry and 4 touchdowns, 127, almost 130 yards a game. So that leads me to believe that they have a weakness on defense, and that's on the ground. And they're not going to be able to establish any sort of passing game with Jameis Winston because their secondary is badass.
It is.
Dinks and dunks can be small stuff. Again, I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. But maybe Winston gets hot and it's a shootout because on the flip side, for quarterback, I think Trevor Siemian's not a bad play. And he's 7,400. So again, it all depends on how you're plugging in, because I like with this cheap running back lineup, I like doing a Cam Newton and Kelvin Benjamin hookup. So I don't want to start Kelvin Benjamin in all of my lineups, but let's say I'm going to start 5 lineups. Let's do one Cam and Kelvin, and then plug Melvin Gordon and Charles Sims in, and then you got the rest of your team.
Let's address that. Let's address that. Cam is your top-tier quarterback in FanDuel this week. Cam had a rough week last week. He got punched in the mouth again. Teams got the blueprint on how to beat him, and it's just hit him. Minnesota's no joke. That defense is for real. Kelvin Benjamin goes the entire game with 1 target, no catches.
Yep.
That won't happen again.
No, anytime that happens in a game, they really kick themselves in the butt, and they do the opposite the next game. It's almost comical how much they try to get the guy the ball.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a situation where you got to think that the first series of downs, Cam's going to drop back and just start feeding Kelvin Benjamin.
Exactly. And
get him involved early.
He can fight for that ball. I don't think Atlanta is physical enough on defense, although they looked a little better. I was surprised. They looked decent.
Yeah, I'll compare Brandon Coleman to Kelvin Benjamin as far as a big receiver. Coleman's not nearly as physical, but Coleman was able to find himself a few places in the zone to sit down Monday night. Benjamin's going to be able to do that as well.
Exactly. Remember, Willie Snead didn't play, so it's not like they lost him in the shuffle. They were well aware of who was starting and who was, so it wasn't a fluke that Coleman was getting those looks.
That's right.
You couldn't stop him. And Benjamin is big enough to reproduce that. Plus, it's probably going to be a shootout. Like I said, you're not going to see the pressure put on Cam that Minnesota is probably the best defense in the league right now.
I don't think there's too much to argue with there. You did bring up something else. You mentioned the name Willie Snead. One of our listeners out there, Matt in Ohio, wanted to know what's going on with Willie Snead this weekend. Everything I've read so far, he was inactive Monday night. It doesn't look like it's a good situation. He was limited throughout the course of the week, or at least as far as yesterday's practice, he was listed as limited. Couple practices left. This is a hamstring injury for this guy. That lingers. They're traveling on a short week to San Diego to go play on grass. If you're listening and you got Willie Snead in your lineup, you got a better option, find one. I'm not starting him anywhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I want to see him back performing at a high level. And like you said, something with a hamstring injury, that's pretty much it. If you don't have a hammy, you're not running.
Yeah, you're not running, and it lingers and lingers and lingers, and it's just not good. So ditch the Willie Snead. No Snead for you this weekend. Let's find a third wide receiver. Terrell Pryor and Kelvin Benjamin punched in there.
I love Mike Wallace this week. I'm sorry, buddy.
Hey, don't be sorry. This is all about winning the kitty here, man. This is about taking that FanDuel trophy home.
He's getting his targets. I really think that we're starting to, again, now that we're into our third week, we're starting to shape up and really start to see what's happening with who can do what as far as defense. I think Jacksonville is decent in the secondary. I think they're a lot better than you think. So the lack of production last week, I think, is going to be gone. Again, it's going into Oakland. I think it's going to be a shootout. So I think Joe Flacco is a good start. So if you wanted to plug in, I like him as a cheap alternative to the Breezes and the Newtons of the world.
Sure.
And that's always a really good formula because, again, logic applies. If the wide receiver is going off, naturally the guy throwing him the ball is having a decent game too.
You would think. You know who I love in that game in particular? David Amerson, the Raiders' number one cornerback, is starting to really pan out as a damn good player. On the other side, Sean Smith, their big free agent acquisition, has not been very good this year. He played well last week, but Tennessee has no receiving core that's worth a damn. Tajay Sharp is too young to be judged. I can see this Raider team having some trouble with Steve Smith. I know he's 85 years old, but look, to me, Steve Smith's my favorite player of all time in any sport ever. Steve Smith's great. I see him giving them trouble.
I just don't like his overall value for fantasy because again, if you're doing one lineup, I don't want to start him. If you're doing 10 or 15 and you want to get a little slick, then yeah, throw him in one and see.
That's good advice.
I wouldn't be surprised, but he just hasn't done enough. And it looks like that Mike Wallace is the guy that's going to get you that deep pass that Steve Smith used to get. The fact that he's still out there and can play, I mean, it's mind-boggling as it is.
After an Achilles rupture last year too.
Yeah, it's I just think his time is coming to an end, and until he shows me otherwise, it's almost like the Willie Snead with his injury. Why take a chance? Because again, you have a lot riding on it if you're trying to win. You just want to see what the hell happens, and sure.
There's only two entities in this world that are going to tell Steve Smith when it's time to retire, and it's Steve Smith and God. He's going to quit when he feels like it.
Smith would override God.
Yeah, it's going to have to come down from the mountain on high for Steve Smith to hang it up. He still moves well. I can just see him giving the Raiders fits, but I do like the Mike Wallace play. The Raiders secondary has been bad. They've given up. They're one of the only teams given up over 1,000 yards after the first two games of the season. They were the only team to do that. I got no problem with Mike Wallace, and he's cheap too. It's $6,700. I want to throw an alternate at you though. I really like Travis Benjamin.
Yeah, because again of the injuries to the team, and he's one of those guys that he's like a Terrell Pryor. So you can figure out how to get him the ball. But he doesn't seem to have a skill set that just says he's a stud wide receiver or, a stud special teams guy. But again, if you can draw up matchups and design plays around him and he gets open, he can be dangerous. So that might be good too. I would probably avoid starting him and Melvin Gordon on the same team. I sometimes I don't like to do that unless you think it's just going to be a massive offensive shootout, because remember, each touchdown, only one guy gets to score those.
That's right, and I don't see Melvin Gordon throwing too many touchdown passes to Travis Benjamin as the years moved on.
Exactly. So
I think that's a great point.
But again, then take Gordon out, try somebody else. If you're going to do maybe Joe Flacco for your discounted quarterback, and you got a little more money to go with the sure things.
Sure. And Mike, you're not the guru for nothing, man. That's good stuff, dude. Good advice. Like it very much. It makes a lot of logical sense. I know this is the no freaking logic league, but it makes a lot of sense. I want to throw another receiver at you out there. This is another value pick, and it's kind of a smoky hot one this week. But Jamison Crowder at $6,000.
I have a lineup I'm just looking at with him in it. He seems to be overtaking Pierre Garçon as the possession guy. You have the deep threat with Jackson, who's probably
he's boomer bust.
Yeah, he is boomer bust. But Crowder seems to be getting his looks. He's cheap at, like you said, $6,000. So yeah, I like him a lot. I also like at value is Emmanuel Sanders, and that's
no kid.
He would plug him in with Trevor Siemian. He is
becoming Simeon's new best friend.
Yeah, he's that smaller guy, that faster guy who gets open, much easier. He doesn't have to run those long routes. And I think he is, like I said, I look at these guys, these type of wide receivers like Sanders and, like, say, a Doug Baldwin, almost like a safety valve wide receiver.
Yeah,
and
okay.
When you have a guy like that, he might get 10 catches and get 90 yards out of it, but that's 5 points, that's 14 points right there. And then if he scores, well, then there you go. That puts you in the winning bracket. To me, when I want to get 20s, if I get 20s, I know I can win. So
and I think that's a really nice play as well. He's developing a nice relationship with Trevor Siemian. And I think that the Buccaneers cornerbacks, their defensive backs, have a lot to be concerned about this week.
Yeah, they're the team that they're facing. Denver, again, they're a really they're stacked at all the skill positions.
Yeah, they really are.
So you really have to play your game and match up your guys. And the Bucs defense, you can't do that with their.
I don't know that Trevor Siemian is going to show up on Sunday and blow up for another 300 yards and 4 touchdowns again. I don't know that that's going to happen, but I think he's going to find his way in the end zone. The Buccaneers don't look like they can get a lot of pressure on anybody.
No.
And that's the key to the NFL. You